I bought one of the super sketchy, questionably cheap generic laptops that have been popping up on Amazon recently. Started seeing them like 6 months ago, and it's like a full proper laptop, but they're like crazy cheap, $260, and they have like really good specs. We're talking 12 gigs of RAM, a 512 gig SSD, and a quad-core processor. I have a feeling like the processor is going to be the sketchy part, but let's open this thing up and see. Painfully generic box, no branding whatsoever. At a glance, painfully generic, but honestly not bad. It's plastic, but the thing's $250. USB-C, USB, HDMI, inside a micro SD and a USB port. Like, so far so good. This thing looks like a normal laptop. The grand reveal. Oh. Honestly, it looks and even feels pretty good. You can tell the trackpad's kind of cheap, but the keyboard feels decent to type on. It's got a full layout. Like, so far so good. Let's power this thing on. I'm gonna do all the setup and everything, then we'll check it out. Okay, so I've got it all set up. It like booted fine on Windows and everything. The setup was super smooth, and I've actually used it a little bit as well, and I've got some thoughts. So first off, it does actually have the specs that were listed. So it does have a legit 12 gigs of RAM at $250. That is crazy in a laptop. And it does have the processor that was listed, but we'll talk about it in a second. So high level screen is like pretty acceptable. Same as like any budget laptop. All good there. Trackpad is meh, but it works totally fine. I'm coming from a MacBook, so I'm pretty spoon fed in that regard. The speakers and audio though are absolutely awful. Not a deal breaker, headphones or whatever, but it's really, really bad, trust me. And then the SSD speed, which is the storage on the computer, which affects how quickly you could transfer files between it, as well as how fast the computer boots. It's nothing fancy, but it's half decent for an SSD and enough to be impressive. And again, really happy with the storage. So now on to how this thing actually performs, and this is where things get interesting. So I started off just doing like my normal day-to-day stuff, which is mostly like in Chrome, YouTube, spreadsheets, chat, blah, blah, blah. Had a bunch of Chrome tabs open, a bunch of programs running at the same time. And because of the 12 gigs of RAM, the amount of just sheer multitasking for like simple tasks like web browsing, this thing was able to handle so well. I was pretty impressed with this thing at this point, but where it all started to fall apart is when I did anything that required any processing power. So the processor in this thing is a Celeron quad-core processor, which isn't anything fancy, but on paper, I thought it might actually be kind of okay because it is a quad-core. It does boost up to 2.9 gigahertz. If you don't know what that means, it's not crazy fast, but it's like at least somewhat sort of kind of comparable to a last gen i3. Now I was optimistic because of the specs, but anytime I did anything processing intensive on the computer, that's things like video editing or even games, anytime where the computer is actually responsible for doing like actual things outside of where you're normally doing them in the web browser where this thing does really well, this thing just fell apart. An example of how bad it is, like you can see here, even on the game's launcher, before I even get into the game, the graphics on the launcher's image were like pixelated. And then gameplay itself on even a super low graphics, low requirement game was barely playable, if that. Long story short, anything processor intensive that I threw at this thing was a total gong show. It did not perform very well at all. Anyway, I did some digging to figure out what's going on here. It turns out the processor that's in this laptop is meant to be used in like really tiny, super compact, low power mini PCs. These things are like produced en masse for like workplaces and things, and definitely not made for gaming or anything processor intensive. I'm almost certain what happened here is whatever factory was producing these mini PCs had a whole bunch of extra ones and they were trying to figure out what to do with them. So they basically threw the motherboard from the mini PC into a laptop case, added a bunch of RAM into it for some reason, and shipped it. With all that considered, would I recommend this thing? You might be surprised to hear this, but maybe kind of in a few very specific situations. So if you're in the market for an actual laptop and you want to do things like potentially play games and use it for your main computer and to do a bunch of stuff, no, the processor is going to hold you back. But for those who are in the market for something like a Chromebook, maybe students or somebody looking to buy for somebody younger, where they don't want to spend a bunch of budget and they're mostly going to be doing web browsing, watching YouTube videos, going on Facebook, blah, 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 this thing could be a good contender to replace that. You're getting a full-size laptop that runs Windows, and 12 gigs of RAM to do all of those things that I just described will make your life so much better. And while the processor is slow, again, when you're comparing it to other things in the $250 price range, it's a reasonable contender. Anyway, that's the weird cheap laptop. If you guys want me to open this up to see if there's a mini PC in there, let me know. Other than that, I'll catch you in the next video.